Kadosh Boker or Daf Yomi, Masechet Batra Daf Samech 62a1. We were starting now where it says over here, Matzar lo metzar echad aroch umetzar echad katzar. What happens if you sell a field to your friend and you put in the shtar mechira, which means you put in the document, the sale document, one of the places, for example, Sadeh of Reuven is mitzar Sadeh on the, for example, it's on one of the sides is going to be Reuven on the east, and the side of the Levi is going to be on the west. Now, the side of Reuven is 100 amot, and the side of Levi, let's say, is only 50 amot. So Amar Rav says, Lo kana ela keneged katzar. Meaning, since I gave you two different directions, but now 1 second, what did I sell you? On one direction, I gave you the dimensions of 100 amot. On the other one, I gave you 50. So what should I sell you? The one of 100 or 50? So he says, I give you the 51. Amru le Rav Kahana Rav Ravasi le Rav. Says Rav Kahana Rav Ravasi to Rav, V'ikne keneged rosh hator. Says, 1 second. Why don't you buy also the mishulash? What does that mean? When you come and you take like an alachson, you're taking, right, like on such a way, why don't you also take half? Right? Because basically what's happening is the kavanah was that one side really behemet is much longer and the other side is shorter. So therefore, that's what you have the footnote there, which is basically that you have the long side and then it comes like this, comes upwards. So you're missing, it's not a square. On part of it, it's going like this. So you're right. On this side of Reuven, you did have much more. And on this side of Levi, you had left. And that's how the field comes up. So Shatik Rav, he kept quiet. He didn't answer anything. Umoder Rav, now Rav does admit, Hechal dika metzar Reuven and Shimon mechagisa, metzar Levi Yehuda mechagisa, that if you have Reuven and Shimon on one side, and Levi Yehuda on the other side, midahaval and michtav led Reuven keneged Levi, why didn't you write down Reuven keneged Levi? Right? Because if you wanted to say that it's only going to be keneged the katzar, he should have wrote down Reuven, which is on the side of keneged the Levi, and he shouldn't have mentioned Reuven and Shimon. So why did he do that? Velo katav, and he didn't write Shema Minas. So you learn from here keneged rosh toru. He did actually say that it's like a alachson, it's like a diagonal, and therefore it was including it. Metzar Reuven mizrach umarav. Again, here you have to look at always the footnotes with all the pictures, because if you don't have the pictures, you're not going to understand much. So it says over here like this. If you have the Metzar of Reuven on the east and the west, so Reuven is on both sides, east and west. You have the picture over there on the bottom by number 12, east and west. Umetzar Shimon, Tzafon v'Dram. So east and west Reuven, north and south Shimon. Tzarich lemichtav les, you have to say, Metzar Reuven ruchim tren, that the Metzar of Reuven is on two sides. Metzar Shimon ruchim tren. So now we're going to ask the following question. What about now the pinot? What does that mean? The corners of the field, which means that you have a sadeh, which is going to be from many different fields, right? You've got many different fields all around it. What's halacha now? You have the picture over there where you have the middle field, and then you have aleph, bet, gimel, dalet, hey, vav, zayin, chet. So you've got many different fields all around it. So what do you do in such a case? So kemin gam, if it's going to be like a kaf, right? That's what it means, the kaf, right? So he comes and he says as follows. He comes and he says, Mahu, what's halacha in such a case? If it's like this kaf. So Samech Bet Amubet says 62b says, Besirugin Mahu. Or what happens if it's going to be Besirugin? What does it mean, Sirugin? Which means it's a sadeh, which is surrounded by 8 different fields, 2 from each side. Okay, so you have the picture over there. Reuven and Shimon, Yosef Binyamin, Zevulun Yisachar, Levi Yehuda. So on each side, you have 2. 2, 2, 2, 2. Teku. In all these cases, in all these 3 cases, we don't know what the psak is. Meaning, did he include everything, not include everything? We're not really sure what it was included or not. So we don't know. Matzar lo mitzar rishon u mitzar sheni mitzar shlishi, mitzar revi lo mitzar lo. What happens if he did dictate, and he told him, on the northern side, A, west, east, but on one side he didn't tell you what it was. Amar Rav says, Kana kol chutz mi metzar revi. He acquired everything except for the 4th one. Ushmuel Amar, right? He comes and he says, and Shmuel says, afilu metzar revi'i, even the metzar revi, Ravasi Amar lo kana ela telem echad al pene kula. 1 furrow, right, on the entire thing. The savala kirav, and he holds a kirav. The Amar shiur shem metzar she'enam vikule. Meaning the fact that you left something over. So therefore, so you left over the entire thing. So Amar Rava comes and he says, Hilchata, what is halacha? Kana kol, in such a case, the lokach, the purchaser, is going to acquire everything which is within the 3 mitzarim, except for the 4th mitzar. Because since he didn't direct what is the 4th boundary, so everything which is within the 3 boundaries he acquires, except for that. But that's only if it's not going to be absorbed inside of it. But if it is going to be absorbed inside of it, kana, he is going to acquire it. So you have the picture over there in the bottom that you see that there's Metzar Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd boundaries, the field, and then the 4th one. So the 4th boundary, that part of the Sadeh, which is the 4th boundary, he doesn't acquire. But if it's absorbed, then yes, look it over there and Tziyul Bet. Okay, and even when we said that it's not going to be absorbed, when you have, right, a gader, which is basically you're going to have some type of a fence, right, which is made out of dikalim, kfufim, different types of palm trees, which are bent, and it's going to be 9 kabin. But if you don't have this, these like fence of trees, and it's not going to be 9 kabin, kana, you are going to acquire it. Miklal. So you could infer from here that when it is going to be absorbed inside, even though it does have these trees and it is going to be 9 kabin, kana, you are going to acquire it. Okay, fine. Now we're going to switch. Remember, whenever there's an ika damri, we flip. So now we said before that Rava comes and he says kana kol, right, and except for, right, excluding the mitzar revi'i. Now it's the exact opposite. Ika de amri Rava comes and he says, Hilchata kana kol afilu mitzarvi. You do acquire even the 4th boundaries. Velo amrian, but when do we say that? Only the mivla. But if it's not mivla, lo kani, you didn't acquire it. And even when it is absorbed, when do we say this? If it's not going to be, there's not going to be any trees or the 9 kabin. But if it does have the trees, which is going to be like a fence or the 9 kabin, lo kana, you don't acquire it. Miklal, so you can infer from here, that if it's not going to be absorbed, even if it does not have the trees and it does not have a tisha kabin, you're not going to acquire it. Shamina mitarvel, but from both versions, whether you go from the positive or the negative, which means whether it is that you do acquire from the 4th boundary or you don't acquire from the 4th boundary, we learn from the words of Rava, that to do with a field, you do not leave anything over. And we also learn that if it's absorbed and you don't have the trees, I mean, you don't have this fence and you don't have the 9 kabin, kana, you do acquire it. We also learn number 2, lo mivla, if it's not absorbed and it does have the trees and it does have the tisha kabin, also you're not going to acquire it, right? Why? Because it's going to be separate, right? Then we learn also number 3 and 4, mivla ve'ikale, right? Whether it's going to be absorbed and it does have, right, the dekalim or the tisha kabin, or it's not mivlan, it does not have the dekalim or the tisha kabin. Itmaleh gisa, you have the 2 different ways of how to do it, whether it is koneh or not koneh, because we don't know. Shuda the dainim, and therefore the shachat of the dainim is they judge it according to the way that they see fit. That's the way it is. Shuda the dainim, right? They're going to come and they're going to judge it according to they see fit, according to how was the mocher. Amar Rabba comes and he says now another thing. Palga de itla li be'ara, chetzi sheyesh li bekarka. So palga, right? So he's going to acquire half, right? But if he says palga be'ara de itli, that means not palga de itli be'ara. First it says half that I have in the land, half the land that I have. So then it's riva. It's only going to be a quarter. So Abaye says to Rava, what's the difference? Meaning, what's the difference whether I said half of the land that I have or half that I have in the land? What was the difference? Ishtik, he kept quiet. So Abaye says, Ana sabrim ishtik. I thought that the fact that he kept quiet, he accepted it, but it's not true. Chazina anu shtared enafkemi memor. We saw different shtarot that came out of the Rabbah. When it was written, Palga Ditli Bada Palga meant half. And when it says Palga Bada Ditli, half the land that I have, it was only a riva, which means only a quarter, meaning that even though he kept quiet, he actually held that way. He held like this shita. Okay? So he comes and he says, that means he just didn't answer. Right? But really, Be'emet, he didn't even pay attention, Kilu, but there obviously had to be a difference. Here it explains that when you say chetzi sheyesh li bakarka, it means chetzi asadeh mimashe sheyach li. But when you say chetzi bakarka sheyesh li, it means chetzi akarka sheyesh li basadezu, which is chetzi of the chetzi, which is a quarter. That's why he's saying it's like half of a half. Fine. Ve'amar Rabba, and Rabba comes and he says, Meitzar ara de mina de palga, de mina palga. When you have meitzara the sadeh that I'm going to sell you, and he says it's going to be a half. So palga, he's going to get half. Meitzar ara de mina pisika, the same thing. Meitzar ara de mina pesika, tisha kabin. That's only going to be tisha kabin. Because pesika is a chaticha, is only going to be the least of the amount, which is going to be 9 kabin. Abaye says, what's the difference between the two? Again, he kept quiet. Ishtik. So savar mine idividi palga. I thought it was going to be both half. So he says velohi, but it's not true. Tamar Rav Yemar bar Shlamiyah, but says Rav Yemar bar Shlamiyah. Something given from the top 63a. The din partially mine Abaye for me was explaining the words of Abaye. Meitzarara de mina palga oben meitzarara de mina psika. Amaleh he says ile mitzrahana. Right, these are the mitzarim. These are the boundaries. Palga. Lo amaleh, but if he didn't say ile mitzrahana, it's only going to be tisha kabim. Tisha kabim is the minimum amount.